The celestial threshold floated in the space between stars, a station so old that the beings who built it had forgotten why they made it. Its halls stretched for thousands of miles, carved from metals that no longer existed anywhere else in the universe. Here, the immortal races gathered to discuss matters in eternity. Ambassador Thyral of the Seraphine walked through the great hall, his body made of pure golden light. He had lived for 900 million years, and in all that time, he had never felt bored. How could he? The universe was vast, and he had forever to explore it. His feet, if they could be called feet, made no sound on the crystal floor. Around him, other immortals went about their endless business. The Vorath drifted past, their bodies made of living crystal that sang when they moved. They shared one mind across millions of forms, and they remembered the birth of the first stars. The Kethmer slithered through shadows, their shapes always changing, never fixed. They had watched black holes form and die, and they would watch many more. These three races formed the Eternal Conclave. They ruled the galaxy not because they wanted power, but because no one else lasted long enough to challenge them. Empires rose and fell like waves on a beach. Species evolved, grew strong, and then faded into dust. Only the immortals remained. Thyral entered the Chamber of Records, where the oldest texts in existence were kept. A young archivist, barely 200 million years old, stood at a reading table. Her name was Velith, and she was studying something that made Thyral frown. "The mortal texts again?" he asked, his voice like music. "I thought we agreed those were fiction." Velith looked up. Her light flickered with embarrassment. "I know what the Conclave decided, Ambassador, but I keep finding references in other documents. Old surveys of distant regions. Reports from explorers who vanished." Thyral moved closer. The text on the table described creatures so strange that he almost laughed. Beings made of soft flesh and fragile bone. Beings whose cells divided and then stopped dividing. Beings who grew old, weakened, and then simply ended. Mortals. "This is a teaching story," Thyral said. "A warning against spiritual stagnation. Nothing more." "But the details are so specific," Velith argued. "It describes how their bodies work, how their hearts pump blood, how their brains create thoughts through chemical reactions. Why would a teaching story need such detail? Because our ancestors were thorough." Thyral waved a hand made of light. "Think about what you are suggesting. A creature that knows it will die. A civilization that rises knowing every member will cease to exist. It makes no sense. What would drive such beings? What would give them purpose?" Velith had no answer. "Evolution selects for survival," Thyral continued. "Any species that accepted death so completely would never develop the will to build, to grow, to reach for the stars. The mortal myth is exactly that. A myth. He left her there with her old books and strange ideas." As he walked back through the great hall, he passed a group of Vorath discussing a mathematical problem they had been working on for 6 million years. He passed Kethmer artists slowly crafting a sculpture that would take another 1,000 years to complete. Everything moved at the pace of forever. The alarm came without warning. Every light in the station flickered. Every crystal hummed. Every shadow twisted. The Conclave had not heard an alarm in 400 million years. Most immortals had forgotten such a thing existed. Thyral rushed to the observation deck, where other ambassadors were already gathering. A Vorath cluster named the Resonance spoke first, its voice like breaking glass. "Long-range sensors have detected vessels. 10,000 of them. Emerging from region Sigma 7. Impossible," said a Kethmer elder called Voshrol. "We abandoned that region 3 billion years ago. The conditions there cannot support life. Yet something comes from there now." The display showed them. 10,000 ships, small and crude, made of metal and fire. They move fast, faster than any immortal would bother to travel. Why rush when you had forever? What are they? Thyral asked. Unknown. They do not match any species in our records. The ships kept coming. More appeared behind the first wave. 20,000 now. 30,000. They poured out of that dead region of space like water through a broken dam. Their communication systems are primitive, the resonance reported. But we have decoded their transmissions. Show us. The display changed. Sound filled the observation deck. Voices, strange and rough, speaking a language that should have been impossible to understand. But the Conclave's translation systems were very old and very good. Confirm jump successful. All colonial ships accounted for. Admiral Chun, the fleet is ready to proceed. Good. All ships maintain formation. We've been traveling for 3 generations. Our grandchildren finished what we started. Let's find out who's been taking our people. Thyral felt something he had not felt in millions of years. Confusion. These beings spoke of generations, of grandchildren, of things that only made sense if... Scan their vessels, he ordered. Scan the beings inside. The resonance obeyed. A moment later, its crystal form shuddered with something that might have been horror. They are warm, soft, organic. Their cellular structure shows clear signs of decay. Their genetic material includes mechanisms for aging, for ending. Ambassador, these beings carry death written into their very existence. Silence fell over the observation deck. For the first time and longer than any of them could remember, the immortals did not know what to say. Mortals, Velith whispered from the doorway. No one had noticed or followed them. They are real. The myths are true. Thyral stared at the screen. 10,000 ships. 50,000 now. Each one crewed by creatures who would die. Who knew they would die. Who had traveled across the stars anyway, knowing that many of them would never see the journey's end. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice wavered. They are brief, temporary. Whatever they want, they will be gone soon enough. Time will do what time always does. But as he watched the mortal Armada grow larger on the display, Ambassador Thyral felt something else he had not felt in a very long time. He felt afraid. The Conclave sent 50 ships to meet the mortal fleet. It was not a war fleet. The immortals had not fought a real war in 200 million years. These were diplomat vessels, science ships, observers. They expected to find lost machines, or perhaps a new immortal species that had somehow evolved in isolation. Ambassador. Thyral stood on the bridge of the endless dawn, watching the mortal ships grow larger on the screen. Up close, they were even stranger than the sensors had suggested. Rough metal hulls covered in scorch marks. Weapons that looked crude and violent. Engines that burned fuel like primitive campfires. They waste so much energy, the ship's navigator observed. Their propulsion is terribly inefficient. They are in a hurry, Thyral said quietly. They do not have time to be efficient. The mortal fleet stopped when the Conclave ships approached. One vessel moved forward from the others. It was larger than the rest, covered in old battle damage that had been repaired many times. The word Defiance was painted on its side in large letters. They wish to communicate, the navigator said. Open a channel. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Thyral had studied the old texts, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of seeing a mortal. The being was covered in soft, wrinkled skin. White hair grew from its head. Its eyes were small and wet, surrounded by lines and marks that spoke of age, of time passing, of approaching end. I am Admiral Chun Wei of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, the mortal said. Its voice was rough. damaged by years of use. You are blocking our path. Tyrell took a moment to compose himself. I am Ambassador Tyrell of the Seraphine, speaking for the Eternal Conclave. We detected your vessels and came to investigate. Your kind is unknown to us. Funny, your kind is unknown to us too. The mortal made a sound with its mouth, a short burst of air. Tyrell realized it was laughing. We've been traveling for 70 years. 3 generations of my people lived and died on these ships, all to reach the outer colonies and find out who's been attacking them. 3 generations, Tyrell repeated. You measure time in generations. How else would we measure it? We measure it in millions of years, sometimes billions. The mortal's expression changed. Its eyes narrowed. That's a long time. It is nothing. A moment. A breath. Tyrell leaned forward. Admiral Chun Wei, I must ask you directly. Your species, these humans, are you truly mortal? Do you truly die? Every last one of us. How long do you live? If we're lucky, 80 years. 100. I'm 67. More than half my life is already gone. Tyrell felt the other immortals on his ship recoil from the screen. 67 years. Less than a heartbeat. This creature standing before him, commanding a fleet of thousands, leading an expedition across the stars, had existed for less time than it took a Seraphine to complete a single thought exercise. And yet, you came here, Tyrell said, knowing you might die on the journey, knowing you might never return. My granddaughter was born on this ship, Admiral Chun said. She's never seen Earth, never seen blue sky or green grass. She might never see it, but her children might, or their children. That's how we work, Ambassador. We plant trees whose shade we'll never sit in. Tyrell did not understand. The concept was too strange, too alien. How could a being care about futures it would never see? How could it sacrifice for people who did not yet exist? Your outer colonies, he said, changing the subject. You mentioned attacks. 12 worlds. Mining operations mostly. Someone's been hitting them. Taking resources. Taking people. Chun's voice hardened. We want them back. The Conclave has been harvesting resources from the outer regions for some time. We did not realize the area was claimed. It wasn't claimed. It was settled. By people. Families. Children who will never see their parents again because your conclave took them. They were mortals. They would have died anyway. The moment the words left Tyrell's mouth, he knew he had made a mistake. Admiral Chun's face changed. The lines around his eyes deepened. His hands, old and spotted with age, gripped the arms of his chair. Say that again, Chun said softly. I meant no offense. I simply meant that from our perspective, mortal lives are so brief that they barely register. The resources we gathered will benefit the Conclave for millions of years. Surely that outweighs the temporary existence of a few short-lived beings. Chun stood up. He was not tall. His body was bent by age. But somehow, in that moment, he seemed larger than the entire Conclave fleet. Every life we have is precious because it ends, he said. Every moment matters because we only get so many. Those people you took had dreams, families, loves, fears. They had 70, 80 years to experience everything the universe had to offer. And you stole that from them because you couldn't be bothered to check if anyone was living there. We have existed for billions of years. We have seen countless species rise and fall. You can't expect us to notice every brief flicker of life that appears in the void. Then let me make sure you notice us. Admiral Chun reached for something off-screen. An alarm began to sound on the endless dawn. All human ships, this is Admiral Chun. Arm weapons. Prepare for combat operations. Thyral watched in disbelief as every one of the mortal ships powered up weapons. Crude weapons. Primitive weapons. Weapons that burned and exploded and destroyed without elegance. "You cannot win this fight," Thyral said. "We are eternal. You are brief. Even if you destroy these ships, more will come. In 1,000 years, you will be dust, and we will still be here." Admiral Chun smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had already accepted what was coming. "Maybe, but you'll remember us. For the first time in your endless lives, you'll remember something. Now return our people, or we'll give you a memory you'll never forget." The channel closed. The mortal ships began to move, and the immortals, who had not known fear in 200 million years, began to feel something that might have been doubt. The Conclave thought the war would last a week. They were wrong. The first battle happened at the Kepler Narrows, a passage between two dead stars where ships had to travel slowly. The Conclave sent 300 vessels, more than enough to crush the mortal fleet. They had weapons that could tear apart moons, shields that had blocked supernova explosions. Experience from wars fought before humanity's ancestors had crawled out of the ocean. None of it mattered. The humans did not fight like immortals. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not protect their ships above all else. Instead, they flew directly at the Conclave fleet, weapons firing, engines burning, screaming challenges across open channels. Vashral of the Kethmer watched the battle from a command ship far behind the front lines. His shape kept changing, shifting from one form to another as he tried to process what he was seeing. A human destroyer, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, turned directly into the path of a Conclave carrier. It accelerated instead of slowing down. "What is it doing?" Vashral asked. "It appears to be ramming us," his tactical officer replied. "Ramming? That will destroy them." "Yes." The destroyer hit the carrier at full speed. Both ships exploded. Thousands of humans died in an instant. But the carrier had held 40,000 Varath crystal forms. In a single moment of violence, the mortals had traded their brief lives for immortal ones. "Madness," Vashral whispered. "This is madness." But it was not madness. It was math. The humans understood something the immortals had forgotten. Numbers mattered. Sacrifice mattered. And mortals, who had already accepted death, had nothing to fear from it. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the Conclave had won. Technically, they held the Narrows. But they had lost 47 ships. The humans had lost nearly 200, but they had known they would. The entire battle had been a delay, a distraction. While the Conclave focused on the Narrows, human colony ships slipped away through a different route, carrying 1 million refugees to safety. Admiral Chun had traded 200 ships and 15,000 lives to save 1 million. And he had done it without hesitation. The war spread across the outer regions. The immortals learned terrible lessons at every turn. Human soldiers did not surrender. Human pilots flew suicide missions without being ordered. Human engineers worked themselves to death, literally, to keep ships running just a few more hours. On the colony world of New Taipei, a group of human marines held a single building for 4 days against an army of Kethmer warriors. The Kethmer could not understand it. The marines had no hope of victory. No rescue was coming. They knew they were going to die. But they kept fighting anyway, buying time for civilians to escape through tunnels beneath the city. When the last marine finally fell, she was smiling. Her name was Sergeant Maria Santos. She was 23 years old. She had been engaged to be married. She would never see her wedding day, or have children, or grow old. But in her final moments, she had held a door against an immortal army, and she had not flinched. Vashral found her body after the battle. He stood over it for a long time, trying to understand. The Kethmer were shapeshifters. They could become anything, survive anything. They had outlived stars. And yet, this small, soft creature, this being who had existed for barely 2 decades, had faced them without fear. How? He asked the empty room. How do you face death so calmly? He reported to the conclave that night. The other immortals wanted good news. They wanted to hear that the mortals were breaking, surrendering, accepting their inevitable defeat. They are not breaking, Vashral said. They are getting stronger. That is impossible, Ambassador Thyrol replied. We have destroyed thousands of their ships, killed millions of their people. Their losses are catastrophic, and they do not care. They grieve, yes. They mourn their dead. But then they stand up and keep fighting. And while they fight, they breed. They make more of themselves. A human female can produce a new human every year. In 20 years, that new human can fight. In 40 years, it can lead. We do not breed, the resonance observed. We have no need. We do not die. Exactly. We replace nothing because we lose nothing. But they replace everything because they lose everything. Every battle, every war, every generation, they grow back. And each time they grow back, they are different. Better. They learn faster than we do because they have no time to be slow. Thyrol shook his golden head. Time will defeat them. It always does. Will it? Vashral's form shifted into something dark and sharp. Their technology has advanced more in the 10 years of this war than ours has in 10 million. They adapt. They evolve. They change. And we stand still because we have forever to do nothing. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that we cannot win this war the way we are fighting it. Every year, they grow stronger. Every year, we stay the same. In 100 years, they might match us. In 1,000, they might surpass us. And in 1,000,000 years, when we are still exactly what we are today, they will be something we cannot imagine. The conclave dismissed his concerns. They sent more ships. They won more battles. They killed more humans. But Vashral remembered Sergeant Maria Santos. He remembered her smile. And he wondered if the immortals had already lost a war they did not yet know they were fighting. The prisoner was small and dark-skinned, with hair that curled tight against her head. Her name was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. She was 41 years old, a scientist who studied languages, and she had been captured when her research ship was destroyed at the edge of human space. Ambassador Thyrol had asked to speak with her. He did not know why. Something about the mortals fascinated him in a way nothing had fascinated him in millions of years. He found her in a holding cell on the celestial threshold, sitting calmly on a bench, reading a book that one of the guards had given her. You are not afraid, Tyrell observed. Sarah looked up. She studied his glowing form with curious eyes. Should I be? You are a prisoner of the eternal conclave. Your people are losing a war. You will almost certainly die here, far from your home. I was going to die anyway. Sarah shrugged. Everyone does. I've had 41 years. That's more than a lot of people get. I've loved. I've learned. I've seen things that most humans never see. If this is where it ends, that's okay. Thyrol sat down across from her, his light dimming slightly. I do not understand you. Any of you. How do you live knowing that you will end? How do you live knowing that you won't? The question caught him off guard. I simply exist. I always have. I always will. And what do you do with all that time? I observe. I study. I discuss matters with the conclave. For how long? For as long as necessary. Time is not a concern. Sarah leaned forward. When was the last time you made something new? Created something? Loved someone? Thyrol searched his memory. It took a long time. The answer, when it came, disturbed him. I do not remember. Because you have forever. Nothing is urgent. Nothing is precious. You can always do it tomorrow, or next year, or next million years. Sarah's voice was gentle, not angry. We don't have that problem. Every moment matters, because we only get so many. But the loss, the grief, when those you love die, yes, it hurts. It hurts more than anything. Sarah's eyes grew wet. Tyrell had learned that this meant sadness. My wife died in the first attack on our colonies. Her name was Jin. We had 12 years together. Just 12 years. That is nothing. A heartbeat. It was everything. It was mornings in bed talking about nothing. It was fights about stupid things and making up afterward. It was holding her hand when she was scared and feeling her hold mine when I was scared. 12 years of that is worth more than 1,000,000,000 years of existing. Tyrell's light flickered. You truly believe that? I know it. Because I feel it. Every single day, I feel how much those 12 years mattered. That pain, that grief, that's not a weakness. It's proof that I lived. That she lived. That we had something worth losing. They talked for many hours. Sarah told him about her daughter, born during the voyage to the outer colonies. A little girl named Hope, who had never seen Earth, who might never see it, who was growing up on refugee ships, running from the Conclave's attacks, never knowing if tomorrow would come. Why did you have a child? Tyrell asked. Knowing she would inherit a war? Knowing she might die young? Because she might not. Because she might see things I never will. Because every generation carries the dreams of the one before it. Jin and I wanted Hope to have a chance at something better, even if we never saw it ourselves. You plant trees whose shade you will never sit in. Sarah smiled. Admiral Chun said that. He was quoting someone from a long time ago. A human who knew that his work would outlast him and did it anyway. Tyrell stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and eternal. He had watched many of them form. He would watch many of them die. And in all that time, he realized he had never done anything that truly mattered. We have forgotten how to live, he said quietly. We have become statues, monuments to our own immortality. We do not create because we have forever to create. We do not love because we have forever to love. We do not hope because we have forever to hope. And in that forever, we have become nothing. You're not nothing, Sarah said. You're just lost. You've been alive so long that you forgot why being alive matters. And you? Brief, burning, dying before you truly begin? You know why it matters? Every second of every day. Because I don't have time to forget. Sarah died 3 years later. A sickness in her cells that the immortals could not cure. She spent her final days teaching Tyrell about human history, human art, human music. She taught him about love songs and wedding dances and funerals, where people cried and laughed and remembered her. Last words were a message for her daughter Hope. She asked Tyrell to deliver it. Tell her I'm not scared. Tell her I'm grateful. Tell her to live every moment like it's her last, because one day it will be. And tell her that her mother loved her enough to cross the stars, and that's a love that never dies, even when we do. Tyrell held her hand as her heart stopped. He watched the light leave her eyes. And for the first time in 900 million years, the immortal ambassador wept. 10 years after the war began, the Conclave gathered every ship it had, every Seraphine vessel of light, every Vorath crystal carrier, every Kethmer shadow cruiser, a fleet so large it blotted out the stars. They came to Sol, the small yellow sun where humanity was born, to end the mortal threat forever. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the bridge of the Defiance. He was 77 now, His hair was white. His hands shook. Cancer ate at his bones, but he had refused treatment. There was no time. There had never been time. That was the human way. Around Earth, 10 billion humans waited to die. They had known this day would come. The Conclave had lost patience. No more small battles. No more limited engagements. This was extermination. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his first officer said. She was young, barely 30, born during the first year of the war. She had never known peace. "We have 4,000 vessels against their 50,000. Orders?" Chung looked at the screen. The Conclave fleet was beautiful in its terrible way. Ships made of light and crystal and shadow, ancient beyond comprehension, powerful beyond measure. Against them, humanity's metal ships looked like toys. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies. I want every immortal to hear this." The channel opened. Chun stood straight, despite the pain in his bones. He was dying. He had always been dying. That was what made him human. "This is Admiral Chun Wei of the Human Defense Force. I'm speaking to every member of the Eternal Conclave. You've come here to destroy us, to wipe out our species, to make sure that mortals never trouble your endless existence again." He paused. On the screen, he could see the Conclave fleet waiting, listening. "You've lived forever. You've seen everything, done everything, and you're so scared of ending that you've forgotten how to begin. You look at us and see weakness. Brief little creatures who die before we really start. But you're wrong. Our brevity isn't our weakness. It's our strength. In the time it takes you to finish a single thought, we fall in love. We have children. We make art and music and poetry. We fight and forgive and grow old together. We pack more living into 80 years than you've managed in 8 billion. You can kill us. Every last one. Burn our worlds. Scatter our ashes. And in 10,000 years, another species like us will rise. And another. Because the universe keeps making mortals. It only made you once. We are not an accident. We are the point. So come and get us. We're not afraid of dying. We've been dying since the day we were born. But we'll make you remember us. For the rest of your endless lives, you'll remember that mortals stood against you and did not blink." He closed the channel. Around him, his crew was silent. Many of them were crying. They knew what was coming. They had made peace with it. "Admiral," the censor officer said, "something's happening in the enemy fleet." On the screen, a portion of the Conclave Armada was breaking formation. Ships were turning away from the main fleet. Seraphine vessels of light. Vorath crystal clusters. Kefmer shadow ships. They formed a new line, positioning themselves between the Conclave and Earth. What the hell? The first officer whispered. A new channel opened. A familiar voice spoke, golden and musical, but changed somehow, warmer. "Admiral Chun, this is Ambassador Thyrol. I bring word from the awakened." "The what?" "Those of us who have remembered. Those of us who met your people and learned what we had forgotten. We will not stand aside while you are destroyed. We choose to stand with you." Chun stared at the screen. A third of the Conclave fleet had defected. Behind them, more ships were hesitating, unsure. "Why?" Chun asked. "Because a woman named Sarah taught me that love does not require forever. Because I held her hand when she died and understood, finally, what it meant to lose something precious. Because she asked me to deliver a message to her daughter, and I intend to honor that promise." The battle, when it came, was not what anyone expected. Immortal fought immortal. Light clashed with light. Crystal shattered crystal. The awakened held the line against their own kind while human ships darted through the chaos, small and fast and fearless. The Conclave forces that remained loyal to the old ways fought hard, but they were confused. For the first time in their endless existence, they faced enemies who understood them perfectly. Enemies who knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. And behind those enemies stood humanity. Brief, burning, beautiful humanity. Dying with every passing second and fighting anyway. Loving anyway. Hoping anyway. The war ended when the Conclave fleet broke and fled. Not defeated exactly. Not destroyed. But changed. Something had cracked in the immortal races. A certainty they had carried for billions of years had shattered. They had seen beings choose death willingly, joyfully, for causes they believed in. They had seen their own people turn against them rather than participate in genocide. They had seen mortals teach immortals how to live. 100 years later, Hope Okonkwo stood in the memorial fields of New Taipei. She was old now, her mother's age when she died. Behind her, humans and awakened gathered together to mark the anniversary of the war's end. "My mother never saw this day," Hope said, her voice carried across the field by speakers. "She died believing the universe was worth loving, even though it would forget her. She was wrong about one thing. We didn't forget. We never will." She held up a small recording device. A message from Sarah, passed through Ambassador Thyrol, kept safe for a century. Sarah's voice filled the air. "Hope, my beautiful girl, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it home. But that's okay. I'm not scared. I'm grateful for your father. Grateful for your mother, Jin. Grateful for every moment we had together. Live your life, baby. Every single moment. Love hard. Laugh loud. Cry when you need to. And know that I loved you enough to cross the stars. That's a love that never dies, even when we do." Hope wiped her eyes. Around her, immortals who had once thought mortals were myths stood with tears on their faces they had never expected to shed. "The stars don't remember our names," Hope said. "But we remember each other. And that's enough. That's everything." Somewhere in the crowd, Ambassador Thyrol listened. He had changed over the century. His light burned differently now, warmer, more urgent. He had learned to love, to create, to hope. He had learned these things from a species that lived for less time than it took him to blink. He had learned them from mortals. And he would carry those lessons for the rest of eternity, a living memorial to the beings who had taught the universe that the brightest lights are the ones that don't last forever.